Morning all.
Hey Ryan, I would have said something, but I had a mouthful of toast. So
That's right. You're out of sight anyway, so you can get away with anything.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, I've had a late start to the morning. Actually, I've been up doing stuff and I forgot to have breakfast. So I'm just going to put it on mute just in case anyone suffers from what do they call it, misophonia or something.
I'm not sure what that means, but I'll take your word for it.
Yeah. It's that condition where people get a bit antsy about other people eating. So
Okay.
All right. Talk soon.
See you soon.
Good morning, Ryan.
G'day, Rob. How are you?
Thank you. Good.
That's good.
Another full day of Zoom meetings.
Yeah, it's going to be pretty solid, isn't it?
Oh, they drive you nuts after a while. You're sitting in the same chair and looking at a computer screen all day. I was very, very weary yesterday after the full day that we had, and today doesn't look much better.
No, it doesn't, unfortunately. Especially when you get these contentious hearings issues which follow.
Yeah, I know. It'll be quite challenging where you've got 80% of the people wanting for no change, and we've got this consent order, not consent order, resource consent that says the changes have to happen. So.
Yeah, I have to try and get my head around what that means. What does it mean? There's no real argument in it.
Well, I either that or we have to send Pack and Save back to. This is on YouTube, so I guess we need to be fairly careful.
Yeah.
Right. So it'd be interesting to see what the options are anyway.
Yeah. Very good. Hi, Blair.
Oh, morning, Blair.
Good morning, everyone. How are you?
Good, thanks.
Hey Blair.
Hello, Mark. It's nice to see that it's not such a nasty day outside today with weather. Gosh, it was windy and horrible and cold yesterday. So felt like winter had sort of arrived again.
Apparently, big swell out at Raglan though.
What was it, Mark? Sorry, I didn't quite catch that.
There was a big swell out at Raglan yesterday and today. Rolling
Okay.
in. Sorry, I'm just rearranging my desk here. I'm trying to get the best use of. Oh, cripes! You know, I've logged on with
Morning,
my.
Maxine. Tyler, is Mark officially part of this committee? I'm just thinking of our quorum.
No, Maxine and Councillor Donovan are not part of quorum.
Okay, but welcome to attend. And
Of course.
we value
You're very welcome.
All right. How far away are we from quorum? Can potentially see Angela. Welcome, Ewan. Is Ewan on the committee? You aren't you, Ewan? No.
No, but I'm one of your
I
loyal
just got-
supporters that keep turning up.
Oh, welcome. You're going to have an interesting afternoon. How far away are we, Tyler, in terms of numbers?
We do now have quorum.
We have quorum. Okay. Welcome, everyone, to District Plan meeting. We'll formally start 9:33. Just a note, Angela, I might need to pass to you around midday. I've got some contractors turning up, so I might just have to navigate that one with you.
Yep, all good.
But thank you. Are there any apologies?
I'll be
I
a
have
part.
received-
Sorry, Chair. I'll be a part attendance.
Okay.
And I also might come and go, but you don't need me for quorum. Thank you.
Noted. All right, thanks. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Angela. Confirmation of agenda. I don't think there's any changes as per prescribed, Tyler. Thanks. Moved by Rob, seconded Councillor Angela. Any declarations of interest? No. Any public forum? No. Great. Okay, we'll move on to confirmation of the minutes, 21st of September, item 5. I'll move unless there's any exceptions. Seconded Councillor Angela. Those in favour? None against. Carried. Unanimous. Fantastic. Okay, just onto the Chair's report. I just want to talk, and it might partly explain Rob's email earlier as well. So up until recently, obviously, we've been having a bit open, and then we moved to publicly excluded because of the sensitivity around the area plans and our work around that stuff. With this MDRS sort of proposed bill that's been dropped on us, it's sort of trumped all of that. And a lot of that is in the public domain. So we can have actually have quite a frank and free discussion during the Chair's report. There will be elements that will be explained further in PX, and staff can explain, and we can discuss the themes that will inform our submission, which we formally approve a week today. So they'll guide us if we start to venture into any PX items. But by and large, what I'm saying is you can also have 2 bites of the cherry, so we can have a pretty free discussion now in public. And then if you think of other things or want further clarification, we can do that again later in PX as well. So if that makes sense. Other than that, I'll take my Chair's report as read, but we will open up for questions. We've got Blair and Lachlan here to help guide us. Essentially, the Chair's report was just to inform, obviously, this bill, this bipartisan bill has come in at pace and frankly doesn't give us much time to provide meaningful feedback. So I think it's really important we flesh out what that means to us and what our options are in terms of how we can inform our response to that. So I'll open up to questions. First, Councillor Sarah and then Rob.
Thanks, Chair Ryan. My first question was just around timeframes. So, is it correct that the timeframe now is August next year, but it was going to be later next year for a lot of these, like beyond the parking changes, was going to be later in the year?
I'll hand on to Blair.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Sarah. So the time frame is that we have to notify the MDRS or the medium density residential elements by August next year.
Okay.
There are other parts of our district plan program which will run under a Schedule 1 process. And part of that is going to be a consideration around whether we slow that work down to enable us to respond to this priority work that the bill is requiring us to talk about, and we're considering as a project team, and we'll obviously come back in December to discuss in more detail with you.
So, for example, the MPS the natural area overlays and things, those could potentially be delayed further in terms of getting them notified.
I might bring Deborah in, who's there. Hopefully she's. I can see that she's.
I guess the reason I'm asking is if there are things that are going to be quite critical in terms of, say, for example, if this ends up pushing out some of these other really important changes to district plan, and we risk in the meantime losing heritage or losing biodiversity because of these timeframes, then maybe we should be at least advocating that these changes around density wait until slightly later in the year.
It's a piece of the work, Councillor, that we need to look at, and we are in terms of what we need to notify. But a lot of the natural environments and significant natural areas will fall to be qualifying matters, and so will have to be dealt with in this first plan change.
Okay, yeah. Thank you. So in terms of timeframes, then that's something you would come back to us in terms of before the next district plan committee, but around our submission on this bill.
We can certainly put something into the submission about integrated planning, but this we actually have to work through the bill first to be sure what's in and what's out as it is.
Mm.
So, Councillor Sarah, you'll be aware that the submission is due next Friday, the 12th of November. Yeah. So we're sort of working in a situation. The bill is still a bill, not law, but we know that the timeframes are pretty clearly set for August 2022. So our proposal, obviously, we submit to the bill today's meeting, and then we'll come back with a more comprehensive plan in terms of what it means for the whole district plan work program to the December district plan committee. You look. All of the reports for today's meeting were drafted, ready to go, and then one day before the agenda was finalised, the bill dropped. So it's been a really substantial change in terms of our whole thinking and approach, and we're still having to work through all of the detail.
Okay, thank you, Blair. In terms of there was mention around vision and strategy in Councillor Ryan's report. Are the greatest concerns around that are infrastructure and ability to work fast enough to put in, stormwater, I guess, infrastructure to support this density?
Deborah?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. I wonder, have we talked to Waikato Tainui around, I guess, this particular bill and where their views lie? Because I'm just wondering if we want to advocate around the impact on the vision and strategy, it could be worth doing that jointly with partners.
So, Councillor Sarah, this afternoon, I've got a meeting of the future executives, including Donna Flavel, to talk about exactly that point, and particularly focus on the vision and strategy and collect submission points on that particular theme. So, and we recognise the voice of Waikato Tainui is critically important on that particular submission point.
Okay, thank you. Last question is just around the, I guess, opportunities to mitigate any potential negative impacts on community amenity and things for the community. Have we looked at, say, for example, noting that this has all been really fast, but building code or other opportunities to require at least like better quality claddings and things, which could go some way to mitigating the impacts of this?
Councillor Sarah, the Building Act, while it's administered by council, applies across the nation, and it doesn't allow for local variation. So the act is what it is.
I was just thinking, like, in terms of our advocacy around this, whether we can say, you know, we should be allowed to have more scope to have require, you know, something above and beyond the Building Act or whatever it might be.
I probably wouldn't be appropriate for this submission, but it's something that we can be advocating for anyway.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Jerome.
Thanks, Councillor Sarah. Lachlan, just picking up on Sarah's question, I just wondered if you wanted to expand a little bit on her request around the vision and strategy.
Yeah, thank you, Ryan. Yes, I mean, it is going to be one of the significant features of the submission that Hamilton City Council presents in relation to the bill. The feedback we've had to date out of Wellington suggests that the vision and strategy has just not been on their radar at all in terms of the sort of policy thinking around the bill. And indeed the policy thinking around the National Policy Statement on Urban Development. So it feels like the vision and strategy as a qualifying matter has been completely lost on the legislators. So the submission that Hamilton City presents in relation to the bill is, you know, quite frankly, it's going to hammer the point pretty hard that there's been a real blind spot here that's just simply not accounted for in the legislation. So, yep, it'll be a big feature of the submission.
Thanks. Got Rob and then Mayor Paula.
Yeah, thanks, Chair Ryan. My first area is perhaps just to get some feedback on whether the build quality is at risk here and what we might be including in our submission around the quality of builds. I haven't seen anything that suggests to me that we've got a list of pros and cons in terms of the 3-storey development without resource consent. And I just wonder whether things like elevators and, you know, whether they'll apply also to mixed office and residential builds, whether there's a likelihood of looser rules around 4 and 5 stories, which will require, I presume, a resource consent. But because we can do because developers can do a whole bunch of things with 3 stories, will 4 and 5 story quality start to deteriorate? Those are just some of the things churning around in my mind at the moment. I'm by no means an expert in this, but I just wonder whether staff have got some real concerns, given the tight time frame to respond, that there are some serious underlying issues here, which we will only find out about when the bills start.
Perhaps I can answer that, Councillor Rob. The things that you're talking about, elevators and presumably fire protection and that, again, that's all done under the Building Act. And there are strict rules about fire protection when elevators are required, etc. So it's primarily a construction issue, is how it's handled. And that's not going to change as a result of this bill.
So you're not concerned that build quality, it's more around the area that Sarah's already identified around environmental aspects of
Yes,
three-story buildings going alongside bungalows and so forth.
Yeah, it's more a change in the environment from an amenity perspective that is the issue here, rather than the actual construction of the build.
Okay, all right. Thank you for that. That's allayed my fears there.
Can I just jump in there and just also add that in the bill there's a schedule of what these medium density standards or medium density rule provisions need to look like, that are basically required to be lifted and placed into the district plan. And included within the template, there are some building standard provisions. They don't extend into things like cladding and materials, but they do deal with things like building height relation to boundary, setbacks, building coverage, impervious surfaces, outdoor living spaces, and the like. So there are standards that are baked into the provisions that would come across. And as you can see, some of those are dealing with urban design and amenity issues, but it doesn't extend into those sort of building cladding, materials, colours, features type stuff. So there's a degree of protection for some minimum standards of urban design, but you're not getting the really deep reach into the materials and claddings and so on.
Okay, thank you.
I think it's just worth also adding to that, Lachlan, sorry, Councillor Rob, when the bill says consent, it doesn't mean that our consenting teams are not overlooking anything that's coming through. So all of these developments will require a building consent. All building consents are reviewed by our planning guidance team to ensure planning rules. So while there may be no consent required, there is a check through by Grant's team, and there will be even under this new legislation. So there are still layers of assurance to ensure that all the legislative requirements are being met.
Thank you. Okay. The second area of concern was the one I raised in my email this morning, and that is if Hamilton is mandated because we're a tier 1 city, and perhaps the towns, and we've seen the press release on Te Awamutu, but also there's Cambridge, there's Morrinsville, who are all undertaking fairly big residential developments at the moment. Is there potentially a disadvantage for Hamilton going forward that these surrounding towns will be able to provide much cheaper residential land and build more desirable builds that will attract Hamilton residents to leave the city and go and live outside the city? And I'm not going to go into the obvious problems that arise there. One, we lose ratepayers, but two, we have an even more increased demand on our roading network or our transport network to get people who work in the city from those towns. And I don't know whether this is more of an economist question rather than a regulatory one, and whether or not, if it is seen as a risk, that should also be in the submission that goes back to government.
Look, I think there's a few parts that, Councillor Rob. The first thing is that Cambridge, Te Awamutu are all classified as tier 1 in terms of this bill. So they are facing the same requirements as obviously Morrinsville is not. This is where Future-Proof becomes more relevant, and I guess the Future-Proof partnership and how Future-Proof responds to the planning. And you'll note that we are in an active discussion with Matamata Piago District Council for them to join Future-Proof. But look, I think undoubtedly the market will respond there as opportunity, and if the market perceives opportunity to develop product in areas where it's not covered by this legislation, then that could occur. So you know, what you've outlined as a possibility, those metro areas, they are captured by this bill requirement as drafted at the moment.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Blair, could I just add something there? An aspect of the bill in its current form is that any authority that's not in the tier 1 areas can apply to use the medium density residential standards and the streamlined planning process, but they have to demonstrate an acute housing need. And there's a process they have to go through with the minister to do that. So at the moment, it's limited to the tier 1s, but there is opportunity for others as well.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Rob. I've got Mayor Paula, you're on and off. Are you? You're off.
No, I got distracted by a phone call coming in and I just hadn't heard the last couple of speakers. So I thought I'd get my mind back in the game. And hear what the other questions were and come back to you in a minute, if that's okay. Just to...
Sure.
I'm not deliberately delaying. I'm just a bit fractured in my thinking. Hang on. Thanks.
Jeff. It's a new old hand, Jeff.
Yeah, no. It was just this laptop's beginning to. This iPad's getting old and it's delayed in its responses when I push buttons. So yeah, can I just get a sense, Blair? The great Chair's report, Ryan, which sums up the frustration that we're feeling. Can I get a sense from staff on what sort of warning they had before this came out? I just want to clarify that.
We received information the same time that everyone else received it, Councillor Jeff. So, yeah.
Wow. Okay.
No notification. So I think one of the areas that we wish to suggest in our submission that you'll consider is council and part of the Urban Growth Partnership, Future Proof, that it is somewhat disappointing that we in an Urban Growth Partnership weren't afforded to have an engagement prior to this bill being made public. So I guess that refers to your comment there, that we had no ability to shape anything prior to it being released.
Wow. Thanks for that. Can I just check? Obviously, there's the amenity worries about the whole thing, huge amenity worries, which we're aware of. But there's also the big thing about infrastructure and the cost of infrastructure across the city to cater for this sort of development. And at the moment, we were heading along the line of trying to target areas so it'd be more cost effective where infrastructure could go. Have they kind of shown any understanding of that or acknowledgement of that issue in terms of the cost of infrastructure and the difference between targeting areas of a city for infrastructure and saying across the whole city you suddenly got to do it? I mean, are they going to open up the Housing Accelerating Fund for the whole city perhaps? I mean, do you sense that they're aware of this?
My sense is that they are aware of the infrastructure challenges, but they are not looking to provide any solutions as part of this bill. So they are, certainly staff of the Ministry for Environment are aware of the infrastructure implications, but I don't believe they fully comprehend the scale or the practical implications that will occur for others. They are definitely, it's a planning-led response, Councillor Jeff. There is no infrastructure solution accompanying this.
Right.
And I think to the question from around the vision and strategy that Lachlan referred to, I think that is one area where we wish to really explore quite deeply how to potentially think about stage development because of the infrastructure implications.
Okay. Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Blair. Thanks, Ryan.
Thanks, Jeff. Back to you, Sarah.
Thanks, Chair. Another question around amenity is just, I'm keen to understand where, if you take what's been proposed, whether there are some simple kind of additions that could at least help with amenity. For example, could they add in there that there is just a need for a sign-off around landscaping proposal, because greenery at the front would make a huge difference. But right now it appears we wouldn't have any influence over that.
Councillor Sarah, I can answer that. We discussed that with the ministry. They were comfortable with engineering type standards. You need a connection, the driveway has to be this wide, it needs to be sealed, but that's about as far as it goes. We can certainly submit on that, but my sense very much was these are, you comply with this and that's it. We don't want any other standards imposed.
Okay. I'd be keen to at least advocate for something of that nature. And in terms of, this might be more to Ryan and Paula, would you be supportive of us, say, asking for a direct meeting with the relevant ministers to discuss some of these really key issues, particularly around infrastructure and the vision and strategy?
Do you want me to comment on that, Ryan, or you want to?
Yep, sure. There you go.
Yes, we can, and I think one of the best places to redo that is again through future proof, like we did before. I was going to bring that up in my commentary shortly, but yes, I agree. I have had one of the ministers call me and chat, not really chat, but tell me a few things. So I've got a few thoughts to share shortly and a couple of questions, if that's helpful, Sarah. But yeah, I think we should shape the future, like with anything. We shouldn't accept it in its current form if it doesn't fit.
Yeah, and the idea of another housing acceleration fund for supporting density isn't a bad idea. So, there's got to be some solutions that we can push for.
I think just further, Sarah, our opportunity will be to add that sort of thinking into our submission next week. Mayor Paula and then Martin.
Sorry, can I just add to Councillor Sarah's comment, Ryan, before Paula? I mean, I think the scale of the infrastructure is meetings.
Sorry, Blair, your internet's
cutting out.
Sorry. It's a terrible connection here, so apologies. Just the scale of infrastructure that this bill leads to is beyond any current infrastructure acceleration fund that's contemplated. It's across the city, and it's in the billions of dollars.
Thanks, Mayor Paula.
Thank you. I've been trying to digest what sits within the district plan opportunity and what sits with the submission, the pushback on the submission, and I suspect it's there's some overlapping edges and considerations. My question is probably, or my comment slash question is around the suitability of lining up with our strategic, is giving effect to government's aspirations with priority to where strategic plans and LTPs are already fully developed. So we push towards, we had that really good meeting with Minister Woods and Mahuta at the Future Proof. And then this came, which looks a little different. I know it gives effect to some of what we were asking for, but it pushes things in a different priority, Blair. And I'm wondering how and where we make sure that our strategic planning is the solid foundation.
Sorry, Paula, I missed half of that. I don't know if, Deborah, did you catch that? Apologies.
No, I'm sorry, I didn't. It broke a bit for me as well.
Oh. Okay, so let me try again. So we had that really good meeting with Woods and Mahuta, right, with Future Proof. They really bought into the whole strategic framework. We had Lale talking about the housing initiative. We talked about Future Proof. We talked about H2A. We talked about the Hamilton Metro Spatial Plan, and the opportunities and barriers of our LTP. I'm wondering where the opportunity sits to ask government to make changes that prioritise existing strategic planning. So, yes, NPS urban development can deliver X, Y, and Z anywhere, but priority would go to where strategic planning is already in place and funding regimes are already in place. Is that through the district? That's the rules set in the district plan. what mechanism do we make our strategic plans the priority again? Is it through the submission? Can we pick some of that up through our district plan by saying consistent with future-proof, consistent with Hamilton Metro spatial plan?
Mayor Paula, we discussed this at a staff level with MFE staff. It sounds like you're talking about a prioritization or staging, and they were very clear with us that that is not the intent. The intent is to do a blanket enablement.
But we can push back, so we push back through our submission.
Yes.
Right. And then one of the ministers spoke to me talking about what Sarah raised around amenity and other community building aspects. One of the ministers, was Minister Parker, I think, spoke to me and said that he was very much in favour of creating this development in a way that had pocket parks and play spaces, and he was particularly keen on green spaces, no surprises there, and also that 20-minute neighbourhood. And I asked him, so Minister, if the NPS urban development is sort of more broad slather, like, is that the sort of detail you'd expect us to put in the district plan then? There will be pocket parks, for example. And he said, yes. So I'm trying to understand the connection between the government objective requirement, what we want to push back on, of course, and then what we can pick up in terms of detail in the district plan, because the district plan will then surely inform the building consent process. Right?
And this is something that we have to work through, Mayor Paula. We're not there yet in understanding the full implications of the NPSUD in the amendment.
Okay, so what work is required because this is coming at us. In fact, so much change is coming at us like a freight train at the moment. It really does feel that way. What is required for us to get that level of detail? Because we have to make a submission next week. We're beavering away with the district plan. What do we need to know now to make the right pushback to government for a constructive way forward?
Well, I think what we need to be saying is there are amenity issues, there are infrastructure issues, there are making sure that we are building communities rather than just simply providing housing. These are all things we want to say in the submission.
Yeah. So at some stage further on through you, Mr. Chair, understanding where the district plan kicks in terms of what drivers and parameters it puts around. Because am I right then, Blair, that becomes what informs the building code? When people come in for a consent, it's got to give effect to the district plan, right?
Well, certainly any development proposals be aligned to the district plan, and so that's where the consenting process is still important. So any building consent still needs to adhere to the plan rules. So I think the key for us, Paula, is
so that we need to really be focused on what rules make the most positive difference, don't we? More than ever.
Correct.
Mayor
And
Paula,
also,
I guess the issue is that what this bill does is it makes, I'll just speak about it simply, 3 dwellings up to 3 stories on a site, a permitted activity, provided you comply with the standards that Lachlan mentioned. We may be able to put some engineering standards in, but that's it. There's no assessment beyond that. These activities are permitted, they go to building consent, and they have to comply with the Building Act. So there's no means of assessment or setting conditions on this. It's just
so how does a council like ours that believes strongly in building communities, not just plonking houses down, how do we deal with that in our district plan? That's my biggest worry, and that's why I have sympathy for what Sarah is saying, because we've talked about this district plan being revolutionary, right, and being able to do things like grey water tanks and green spaces and different ways of dealing with stormwater and to create this 20-minute livability I just need to see what sits in our political push right now, what sits in the detail of the district plan, because my fear is that it'll just go down to local government directive, building consent, bang, off goes the development with no fettering at all.
That's largely what this plan does, unfortunately, Paula.
I know. So I'm just trying to figure out what tools we have to make it clear to government what the outcomes would be of this that they may not have considered. Sorry, I know I'm taking time, but I really want them to understand what it is they unleash upon us by asking the right questions and giving
I think if I could answer, Blair, I think essentially that's where we as a council, elected members, have to put a pretty gold-plated submission in, because this is really our only opportunity to get a foot in the door. So today and in PX and over the next few days, we've got to put everything on the table, every legal hook and every concern that we have, because once this becomes law, we have very little control.
Which is why I suppose I was asking Deborah, when would that understanding of the ramifications of the NPS urban development, when would that be through to inform that? Because you haven't got much time. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to put more pressure on you. It looks like you've got hardly any time to do that.
Pretty much. The ramifications are big, and it is a very blunt tool. So we must zone our residential areas to allow this. There is some room, and when we go through our presentation a bit later in PX, we can talk a bit more about that. But the bill does allow us to put in a provision for financial contributions on permitted activities, which could provide funding for the things that you're talking about.
Okay.
Maybe Paul and Lachlan, I don't know whether you want to just mention anything, but effectively, this bill is I guess mandates some wholesale changes to the district plan, which we must give effect to.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's
ties our hands.
Yeah, there's no way of softening the message. This is central government cutting right across local government decision making on how you want your urban form to look and feel, and saying these are the density requirements that the residential zone needs to enable, and with it is going to come a very substantial change in urban form. There are qualifying matters which can offer you a carve out from these obligations, but just like that, they basically replicate the same qualifying matters that are set out in the NPSUD. So it's really those very big picture items like historic heritage and so on that potentially would qualify. But we've talked about how character or a particular character in a street doesn't necessarily qualify as a carve out. So yeah, it's a very blunt instrument, and it cuts across local decision making on what you want your urban form to look like. And if you have a problem with that, submit.
Yeah. Okay.
Happy for now, Mayor Paula?
On box of fluffies.
We'll have debate on this, and then we'll go into PX, and you can have another bite at the cherry too, of course. Councillor Martin, you're on mute, sir.
Yes. No, I mean, I guess maybe it's stringent debate in terms of the role of some of the other parties become quite crucial, not just in terms of a alternative voice on the bill, but in the future those parties will be part of an oncoming, in part of a government. The question one, the strategic, obviously, is Nicole in the room from our comms department? I mean, is anyone from comms here?
Simone might be there.
Craig or Simone.
Oh, great.
Yeah, I'm here.
Excellent. I'm seeing someone there. Yeah. So no, and why I say that is comms, I think, will become quite crucial to us, because I think it's really important how we communicate our submission to the wider public is really important. There is some media commentary about, councillors just representing a so-called NIMBY, and that's such an incredible gross generalisation where obviously we, of course, message we want to improve the supply of housing. We want to deal with the housing crisis in this country. We want to deal with affordability, but I guess what our submission is we're wanting a more nuanced approach, all right? So, I mean, maybe we'll discuss that in PX. Sorry, Simon, I didn't see you there. Apologies. But, I mean, it seems to me that it's not just Paula and yourself, Ryan, flying to Wellington and presenting the submission. That's important. Obviously, it's working with our partners in Future Proof, other local government, but very much hearts and minds explaining to our community what we're trying to achieve here, all right? I think that's really important. And dare I say it, our local MPs have seen this as a bipartisan. Our local MPs of all political persuasion, we need to jump in a bus with them and take them around. And with respect, I want to take them to some of the crap developments that we've had in the past, even with under our own hands historically, and basically the message we've got to get is we want a slightly more nuanced approach than this bill is apparently giving us. Not against the aspirations of both the Nats and Labor and getting housing, people being into housing, absolutely not against that, but it's the how, I guess. And I think we really need to communicate that to all MPs and to the public.
Thanks, Martin. We'll take that as part of your debate.
That's part of my comprehensive combined question and debate, Mr. Chair.
Very good. Okay, all right. Look, there's going to be more time to discuss this. So I'd like to move to debate, if that's all right. I'll move that. We're just receiving the Chair's report. Seconded by Deputy Mayor. Thanks. Look, I'll start. I haven't really prepared anything, but I've just written down 13 points in the last half hour that I think need to be mentioned. Auckland and Wellington are not Hamilton. We're getting lumped in as a tier 1 city with this. Wellington is 440 square metres. Auckland is 1,086 square metres and Hamilton is only 110. So we're 10% of Auckland, 25% of Wellington, and yet we're lumped in with this complete dinosaur dump over our city. Tauranga has commissioners. I don't know where their planning situation is at, but I don't want to be lumped in the same boat as those. We have a really bespoke regional housing initiative with over 80 stakeholders, a huge ecosystem. So we're really front foot and proactive in this space. So were they even consulted? We've got a housing strategy. Later in our report, we talk about a Fairfield-Enderley urban development partnership with Kainga Water, which is a massive suburb, if you could factor that in, which was factored into our NPS thinking and creating nuanced, high density, but acceptable community development. I'd like to see that our submission is joined up with our neighbouring councils. We're already seeing in the media their concern and their distrust and their discontent. There's no mention on urban design. Who cares about urban design? Let's just build three units on a single story. Who cares? That's the message government is telling us. In terms of qualifying matters, Lachlan, you've been earning your keep lately, but our vision and strategy, I think you're going to pull one out of the hat for this. This is a unique, nationally significant piece of infrastructure which we can use and need to use to maximally push back and leverage on this proposed bill. The NPSUD catchment work, we've already resourced this through our 10-year plan. We've been honouring the government's mandate. We're honouring the CBD redevelopment. We've had preliminary support from the infrastructure fund around the CBD. We've done the data. We know that we can deliver on the housing shortage in the CBD alone with the walkable catchment, let alone nuanced area plans. We don't need this big generic dinosaur dump put on us. There's no infrastructure consideration with this. It cuts across the government's own four well-beings. There's no mention of social, cultural, or environmental considerations. Here ends my rant. Who's next? Deputy Mayor is the seconder.
Thanks, Ryan. Yeah. Look, well said. Yeah, look, I've been trying to sort of contain my outrage and how stunned I am by this, and I realise hot-headedness will do no good. I find myself just so disappointed that through the abruptness of the announcement and the bluntness of the instrument, as Lachlan referred to, I really feel it's kind of put central government and local government relations at an all-time low. And I'm not saying central government as in Labor, this is a bipartisan thing. But in terms of the trust, just following on from the mandating of Three Waters as well, it puts that at an all-time low. And that's what worries me. You know, you've got your future proof, you've got your growth partnerships, but when you can't trust one of the partners, it's no longer a partnership. And, you know, the whole building communities and for well-beings, they're lovely words and lovely notions, but if this goes ahead in anywhere near the form proposed, forget about that. It's just words. It's nothing. So I think our submission needs to be intelligent, but it also needs to be hard-hitting and clear. I'm hoping that there may be a path to negotiate at least breaking out parts of the city in some sort of priority to try and deal with the infrastructure costs. I'm hoping, you know, that might be a way forward, that you can still agree on some sort of priority, which is what we were trying to do with the NPS urban development. But I guess after the Three Waters fiasco, I'm a little bit concerned about the whole submission process, about, is it going to be a charade? Is it going to be listened to? But we've got to make our best efforts and have a good, sincere crack at it, however it's received. So yeah, I have some sympathy for planning staff, growth staff, having this dumped on them, despite, you know, years of what they thought was sincere discussions with government, and then this happens. And I've got real fears and concerns for the people of Hamilton who already are worried about unsympathetic development propping up next door to them. Well, this is just, you know, we're going to look like Bangkok. It's going to be like that on steroids. So, but really keen to see a strong submission as well as a clear and articulate one. Thanks.
Thanks, Jeff. I've got Councillor Rob and Mayor Paula.
Thanks, Chair Ryan. I will also try to avoid being having a hot-headed debate over this, but I do echo both your comments and those of Deputy Mayor Jeff. I think we're facing a huge wave of forced changes that are coming at local government at a very, very fast pace. And I didn't want to use the wave as a pun against the water. Either this is the outcome of a failing government, or this government sees local government as an historical nuisance whose regulatory powers are now outdated and need to be sidestepped whenever our regulatory powers get in their way. We're seeing this in a major way with the Three Waters reform, as Deputy Mayor Jeff has already alluded to. We've got the RMA changes, and for those who sat through the local government reform webinar last week, will have taken a takeaway from that, was that the panel has already decided that there is considerable mistrust between central government and local government in that order. Now we've got the NPSUD, which was enacted last year and largely forced upon us, being subject to further change, but this time with even less in the way of consultation. And that's annoying for councils who need to plan. We need to be able to get intelligent discussion and submit And even when we do submit, as we found in the Three Waters reform, government seems reluctant to listen and make any obvious changes. After the Three Waters feedback, I've reduced confidence in government listening to any of the input that we're likely to be putting in at this stage. But I do suggest that staying silent and not doing anything will not be the appropriate outcome. I would like to see us being more active with our local MPs, despite the fact that we have hearsay evidence that they are gagged from Wellington and whatever influence they might have. And as Chair Ryan has said, identifying the differences between Hamilton, Auckland and Wellington and other cities, it's unlikely that they will be able to even take our feedback and present that back to central government. So look, I'm a reluctant party here. I think we do need to submit, and we need to submit well in the best way that we possibly can in this very, very short time frame. But, you know, I'm quietly unconfident that nothing will happen from our submission. Thanks.
Thanks, Rob. Mayor Paula.
Thank you. This NPS urban development has the potential to change the face of Hamilton irrevocably for all time. So we have to get this right. We just have to get this right. I will say one thing, affordable housing is at a crisis point. It's been at a crisis point for ages, but it's even getting worse. We just had news the other day about the house prices going up, and we still haven't been able to deliver on our promise of affordable housing. So we do need to do something, but this is not it in its current form. What disappoints me, I guess, is it doesn't line up with the considerable strategic planning that we've done. Hamilton, and this is all credit to people who've been here before me and staff, has done an amazing job with our spatial planning and our strategic planning. Our future planning in layman's terms, we've got Future Proof, which looks at the Waipa, Waikato, Hamilton relationship and has planned out where growth should happen and has made the corresponding changes to our long-term plan, our funding. In addition to Future Proof, and really disappointing that this is such a blunt mallet to development, because we had a really, I thought, a very good meeting with ministers in Future Proof where they fully understood and said and gave us great accolades and praise actually for our planning. Future Proof, Hamilton Metro Spatial Plan, Hamilton to Auckland Plan, the way we work with Tauranga in terms of the Golden Triangle. We're acknowledged for all that good work. We've done the yards, we've set it down, we've decided where growth should go, and in our LTP, we've matched that with as much money as we are able to bring to the table. That's not enough. It's nowhere near enough. We all know there is a massive shortfall coming at us for infrastructure to really deliver. But we've done what we can within our long-term plan. I would like to see the NPS urban development give priority and give us to those spatial plans, to those strategic plans, and give us wings to fly off the back of the good work that we've done. Lale Eremia, on behalf of the Housing Initiative, gave an awesome presentation and demonstrated 10 times over that our plans will deliver affordable housing if we can get the infrastructure in place and we can get cracking in the places that we've identified to get cracking. I'm a fan of infill in some places. I think the CBD is right for beautiful apartments of good high quality for people to have that inner city living. I've always said, way before I was elected as mayor, in the last term in fact, and I'm not alone with my colleagues, that we need to take care with how we infill other areas of our city. We have seen some good, bad and ugly development in the central city, in other parts, in the suburbs. And people have the right to some certainty about what's going to go on in their neighbourhood. We must build neighbourhoods, we must build strong communities, not just plonk houses down willy-nilly anywhere, but make it quite clear to people we do need housing. We do need to push hard for housing going where we've planned for housing to go.
Thanks, Mayor Paula. I've got Councillor Angela and then Sarah.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Look, agree with all the points of all the previous speakers gone before me. Look, the issue with this is the goal posts just keep changing on us. Some years ago, the government was talking about the HIF fund. And when I say the government, I'm in the same camp. This is not about red or blue. This is the government of the day and the policy that we're talking about. So we went ahead and we did some work on our population growth, and we knew we needed 1,200 extra homes per year. So we forged ahead with Peacock, and the government gave us money. And then they changed the goalposts and they came out with the MPS. And now they're changing those goalposts or moving those goalposts again. I'm going to keep saying this about affordable housing because I don't want it to be lost. But there is a crisis, and that crisis, in my personal view, started several decades ago when the government of that day sold off 12,500 state homes. They moved all those residents into the private sector, causing a complete imbalance, and that's why we have a housing crisis. Look, these latest changes, it was bad enough the other day or a few weeks ago, when we realised there could be 3 dwellings on a site. Now it's three dwellings and 3-storey dwellings with pretty much no rules around them. This removes car parking, it destroys character of our suburbs, and it will divide neighbours a lot more than we're seeing now. Look, yes, we've been asked for feedback. I'm remaining incredibly cynical, like some of my colleagues have said, and I have lost confidence as well that anything that we'll say to represent the people of our city and the work that we're doing will be taken on board. My strong request to this council is, when we are putting in our submission, let's not get lost in the detail that we did with Three Waters. It was like a magic show, over here we were getting bogged down in the detail, trying to figure out what on earth the information was telling us to provide a submission, and it was ignored anyway, while over here they were pulling a rabbit out of a hat. So I don't want to respond to the feedback that they want. I want to respond with a list exactly like Chair Ryan has put down, what we're doing, what we've done, what's successful for us, and putting a Hamilton Inc. position. Whether we support it or not, I don't support the direction the government is going, but I don't want to get lost in their detail, only for them to turn around and ignore us anyway. So let's put our case forward on what we're doing and why we can do it better, because we are actually local government, and we've been doing a considerable amount of work, and I think fantastic work. So I'd like to see our chair write that submission, because I agree that is the basis of our submission. Let's not get bogged down by the detail. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Angela. Councillor Sarah.
Thank you, Chair. I think I sit slightly differently on this issue, because I support I think we all support greater density, but in principle, I support, having a much more compact city. It's got a huge number of benefits, including being able to support better transport choices. We don't want to be a sprawling mess like what Auckland has ended up like. But at the same time, I think that we need to look at this with a dash of reality, and by allowing people to be able to build 3 stories up to 3 built houses on a site without any requirements around amenity, I think that's a little bit crazy. Density can look good, and it's been done well in other places. It's even been done well in Hamilton. It's not about the density itself. I don't think 3-story buildings are a problem in themselves. It's the way that we do it. And we need to be strong in saying that we actually need some measures around ensuring that there's good landscaping, ensuring that there's quality building materials, And I think that even though this submission is, focused on this particular bill, I do think that we can put in there and also advocate separately that we need some changes to the building code. The difference that quality cladding makes is huge. The fact that buildings are only required to be built to a design life of 50 years, I think contributes to a lot of buildings in Hamilton being quite poor quality and quickly looking less than desirable. We also need to be really strong in terms of our vision and strategy. So that's again where, while I think density is important, we also need to be looking after our waterways. And if it means that we can't be doing both at the same time, then we absolutely have to be striking a better balance. And I think that at the moment, the government is putting out all of these different policy statements, but often they're contradicting each other. And so we need to be really clear that if they want us, if we want to be able to achieve things like quality water and biodiversity in one space, then we need to actually take a more nuanced approach when it comes to where we're putting housing as well. So I guess ultimately we're all asking for similar things, but at the same time, we have to. I think we have to be careful that we're not just trying to preserve character and keep things as they are at the moment and be too influenced by that. Ultimately, housing affordability is really important. So it's balancing that against the other things we're trying to achieve.
Thanks, Councillor Martin.
Yeah, thank you. I was just questions before, as you know. Look, the one thing that keeps me awake at night and makes me enormously depressed is that we have a whole generation of our younger people for whom home ownership is a distant dream, and that is a tragic travesty of what is the New Zealand dream. And giving everyone a fair go is we must use every hour, every moment, everything in the toolbox to give our young people their aspiration, if they want it, to have their own home. However, I think the legislation that is currently written appears to be a very blunt tool, and as other speakers have said, doesn't acknowledge all the things that we are doing through future-proof in local government to use everything in the toolbox. So I think in a sense it's going to be, the submission is going to be the combo of getting into sort of that detail, but not losing the overall communication strategy as well. And I want to sort of say that if the government, and including Her Majesty's opposition, the Nats, if they are seriously committed to the well-beings, how is that reflected in this legislation? So this is all about nuance. In closed session, as an old MP long ago, I'll give you some good advice of how you should lobby in Wellington. And please do not underestimate the influence and role long-term of both the ACT, the Te Pāti Māori and the Green Party. They shouldn't be forgotten in this equation. I've got to tell you, sometime in the future, one of those parties will be sitting possibly in a future government. So don't underestimate the need to communicate with all MPs, and obviously keeping our submission, if you like, bipartisan, so that we reach out to everyone. Just finally, I just want to say that I'm really heartened if I'm looking at the new leadership of the city. Ryan, well done on your contribution. Angela, Sarah, I think you really had it on the nail. And this is a funny old world, because my good friend Rob and Jeff, there were aspects of their contributions that I genuinely was saying, yeah, they're on the button there. You know, I think on this one, we're broadly extremely united in what we, that's my humour, sorry, but all of us are really united, I think, and want to get the best outcome for our city. And again, big shout out for what we've been doing. Thank you.
Thanks, Martin. Councillor Mark.
Yeah, thanks, Chair Ryan. Hey, great report. Excellent commentary from Councillor Gallagher as well. Said a lot of the things that I was going to say, except that I thought the thing that kept him awake at night was me driving my ute around and looking for car parks in Central City. So, no, that's good. Look, I think we're missing a bit of a point here, and I've just sort of been sitting back thinking about it. You know, this government is really leading us down a path of, this new kind of world that we live in. And one of those things in particular, I think that we're heading towards now is a generation of renters starting to come through. I mean, we talk about affordable housing. Housing's been unaffordable for as long as I can remember. If you were sort of in the same era as some of my fellow colleagues, maybe you could pick a house up real cheap back in the day, but you still paid for it through the cost of money. I mean, money's never been cheaper, and yet now we've got a supply issue. So, look, the only real solution is this upwards, not outwards type strategy that's coming into play. But I like what Sarah said. Can we do it in a way where it looks stylish, so we don't end up with some of those less desirable places in the likes of Claudelands and just thinking about some of those areas where there's some of that horrible brick stuff being done. So look, I'll leave you with the fact that I think that the south of Auckland area, the Drury, the places like that, you look at all those big subdivisions going in now, they're going to be those mini kind of subdivisions of 3-story high multi-dwelling locations for people to reside in. And I just think that what we're going to see is this next generation, and I've got kids 20 and 18, I'm having conversations with them about houses. They don't know what they're going to do, and they're already using the R word for rent. So that's my piece anyway. Thanks.
Thanks, Mark. Councillor Dave, where did you come from?
I've been here listening intently to what you've been saying, Mr. Chair, for the whole time. Look, I have to say to Mark too, who's just spoken, good speech, but to be honest, Councillor Gallagher is not waking up sleepless at night thinking about your ute so much as thinking about having to repaint all those car parks to longer lengths that you asked for yesterday so that they can fit your utes in. Look, the real issue here, I feel, and the point of agreement perhaps between all of us, is that yes, we agree with the need for intensification, up, not out, compact urban form, better transport solutions in that, but we don't agree to it in an open slather way that doesn't give you local flavour. It's not nuanced to fit the needs of the city, or probably any city in New Zealand, to have an open slather. It's an easy way to bureaucratically write a rule, but it's a very poor way to design a city. And I think we're probably all coming from that direction. So I support a strong submission that talks about the need for good urban planning, and that doesn't mean a one-size-fits-all set of regulations. I think it's sort of quite simple, that argument. We have to really sheet that home. If you want a good outcome for New Zealand, for Hamilton, then you don't have an open slather, one-size-fits-all rule, because it will not work, and it'll have a whole lot of known consequences and probably a whole lot more unintended ones as well. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. Yeah, just in closing, like really good feedback from everyone. Thank you, in a real sense that we're relatively united on this. I think Councillor Angela's point is correct on not getting into the detail. It's really about principles, the first principles, and I think we need to make that really clear. I guess I'd only slight different view from Sarah, I guess, appreciating her perspective, was I don't think this is a submission on tweaking. I think if we try and offer tweaks, we'll get lost in the noise. I think it's fundamentally a redesign that's not fit for purpose for our city. I think that needs to be really clear. We're already consenting 1,500 houses a year at record levels. And according to this study, if you extrapolate it back to Hamilton data, it would be an additional 1,500 per year, which is 3,000 per year. And I don't think our market can even sustain that. So I just think it needs some refinement. And I think it's important that over the next week, we get really clear on what that will look like. So thank you. We'll go to the vote, noting it is just to receive the report. Those in favour? Any against? Carried unanimously. Fantastic. We're going to go straight into the General Manager's report, and then we might have a 15-minute break after that and move into PX, noting we're aiming to finish by 1 o'clock. And I'm not against finishing earlier as well, if we need to, of course, noting we've got hearings at 1:45, so that'll give us a good 45-minute lunch break. Thanks. Blair.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Ryan. Look, I'm happy to take the General Manager's report as read and just open it for questions. I think we've covered the substantive topic through the discussion of your Chair's report. So as I say, very happy. More substantive item for us is the matters in PX as we start to dive into the detail for the implications for our planning program. So happy to take questions on anything in the GM report. Hopefully you got that. Hopefully that came through okay.
Yeah, no, thanks, Blair. No, we're all surprised that you didn't talk longer.
I'm keen to get into the presentation part of the agenda.
No, fantastic. I've got a question it's question A, Councillor Martin.
Sorry, look, I can't wait to get back in the building. I tell you, I have a computer that keeps raising my hand, so that may be, yeah. Sorry about that.
Okay, look, if there's no questions, there's going to be opportunity to touch on these again in PX. So I'll just move that we receive the report. Seconded by Mayor Paula. Is there any debate? None. Is there any against? None. Carried unanimously. Okay. I'll move that we move into PX. Seconded by Councillor Robb. I wonder if we'll just take a 15-minute break now, 11 o'clock. We'll come back in PX